The humanitarian needs of more than 100,000 refugees fleeing into neighboring countries are getting more urgent. The United Nations says aid agencies and partners are facing a funding gap of $1.5 billion. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma has that report.
The clashes in Sudan are now into the third week. Thousands have been forced to flee the volatile nation. With it has emerged a complex scenario of humanitarian needs. Humanitarian agencies are now appealing to donors to close a funding gap.
We're calling on all donors to look forward and get cash out to the humanitarian organizations already struggling before the recent escalation, who will need money to implement the reboot of the response in Sudan that we're working on. Without that, they simply cannot operate.
UN agencies are calling for the protection of civilians and safe passage for refugees and humanitarian aid.
The number of displaced people through the last 2 weeks exceeds, as a result of conflict, exceeds all conflict-related displacements reported in Sudan in 2022. Just to give you a sense of the scale of movement since April 15. Now, all areas remain inaccessible to humanitarian agencies. However, IOM is able to continue to provide these preliminary displacement figures.
The most significant cross-border movements so far have been Sudanese refugees arriving in Chad and Egypt, and South Sudanese returning to South Sudan. Most new arrivals in Chad and South Sudan are women and children. While UNHCR has already large operations in many neighbouring countries, last week we deployed already additional emergency teams and activated our global supply chain to bring relief items especially for Chad and South Sudan at the moment.
Countries neighbouring Sudan impacted by this new emergency are already hosting large refugee and internally displaced populations. The World Health Organization says the biggest health risk for Sudanese people now is the conflict itself.
Majority of health facilities are non-functional any longer. Many of them are partially functional, and we know that in situations like this there is an issue of trauma injuries. So there is a need for supplies to treat trauma wounds, but also the issue is access to other health services, including to maternal health and the newborn health as well. There is an issue of lack of clean water.
According to the International Organization for Migration, at least 334,000 people have been internally displaced within Sudan since the fighting began. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.